The last letters from the Holocaust reveal the triumph and tragedy of the darkest chapter of the Jewish people. Each year, Israelis pause to remember the Holocaust, the slaughter of 6 million Jews by the Nazis and their collaborators. In talking about such a daunting subject, it's often hard to grasp the reality of each person's story, their life, family, hopes, and dreams. An online exhibit from Israel's Holocaust Museum aims to tell those stories. Before COVID pandemic hit, CBN's Scott Ross visited Ya드바셈 in Jerusalem to bring us that story.
My dear Rosie, I am happy that you received our greetings. What are you up to, my darling? Be well. Many kisses from your mother.
In every letter at the beginning and at the end, she wrote, "Make sure to take care of your health."
That's the final letter Rosie Yoshkovich received from her mother, Berta.
Each story is unique. In those online exhibitions, we're telling stories first to commemorate the victims, to give them back their names, human dignity.
Yona Kobo oversees the new exhibit, Last Letters from the Holocaust, 1943.
The letters were chosen because they are very intimate, very personal, very unique, because each handwriting is different from one person to the other. You can find stains of tears of those who wrote the letters and tears of those who received the letter.
When you read these letters from mothers, fathers, children, what does that do to your heart?
Sometimes it's tearing me apart. Sometimes I'm crying.
How were they delivered? Was there a post? There was no postal service
The
in that.
post service worked the entire war, even in the camps.
Censorship.
Sometimes not, but I think they censor themselves.
Kobo gave us an extremely rare look at Yadybasem's vast archives, where I saw some of the actual letters. What does this say?
That was written by a child. She was almost 12 years old. Her name was Regina Folkenflik, and she was living at East Poland. She was hidden at a Christian family. Her parents thought that was the best way to save her, by putting her in a good family. But the child was shot. The rest of the family survived. And her brother, now 84 years old, donated the letter to Yadybasemem. It's in Polish, and she's writing, "Dear mother and father and dear Dolik," her brother, "be well. Mommy, don't be upset. Please forgive me, Mommy, for writing so little."
And here's another one.
That is another one, written by a young woman, 19 years old, Rosette Bomblat. She was active in a group of underground movement in Paris. She helped saving other Jewish children. Her family was hidden in a village not far away from Paris. And Rosette is writing here in French, "I'm only living for the day that we will be together again." All the family, except of Rosette and her older sister Sarah, survived and emigrated to Israel.
She didn't.
She didn't. She was transferred to Auschwitz. She was murdered in the camp.
What about your family?
My mother was born in Germany, and she has been through a ghetto, a labor camp, and a very, very long death march. She marched 800 kilometers by foot. My father survived Auschwitz, and they met after the war was over. And when I was older, like 35 years old, my father remembered to tell me his secret. He was a widow when he met my mom. He lost his first wife and baby daughter in Belzec. I just recently found the name of his daughter.
This online exhibit is just one of many at Yadybasemem, the main collection of Holocaust documentation in the world.
So one of the main missions of Yadybasemem is to collect into one place all the documents, all the evidence about the fate of Jews during the Holocaust. It was the first intention of Holocaust survivors the first day after the war was ended.
Dr. Chaim Gertner is director of the archives.
We understood that the Nazis not only planned to murder the Jews, but also understood or wanted to annihilate, to erase our ability to know who were they and what happened to them.
Erase the memory.
So this is why Yad Vashem decided as one of its most important missions to collect all those pieces of huge puzzle of our joint history into one place.
The more than 200 million pages of documentation includes testimony, survivor stories, photos, and other personal items.
We launched 7 years ago a national campaign. We call it Gathering the Fragments. We met until now close to 11,000 people who donated to us during the last 7 years more than 124,000 items and collections.
And are there many survivors living today that have seen this, been here, and experienced this?
Yes, Holocaust survivors do see Yad Vashem as the home of their items, and they say here it will be kept forever, even preserve it. And I may tell you the story, for example, of this sweater over here.
Yes.
That was donated to us on the first day of this campaign 7 years ago by a lady from Tel Aviv. It was belonged to her sister. So for her it took a lot of time to decide to separate with that.
The name Yad Vashem comes from the Bible. It means a memorial and a name.
Yad Vashem during the last 2 decades and more is struggling to tell the story of individuals in the Holocaust. They were human beings that used to live in Europe and elsewhere, and they had lives, they had kids, they had dreams, and it tells us also something about their ability to survive during those years in those inability times.
How important is it to have all this online?
Around 1 million visitors are coming to Yad Vashem every year. Almost 10,000 of them are visiting our reading room every year. But last year, more than 19 million people all over the world, Jews and non-Jews, used our databases online.
Because you're around this and have explored this and researched it, do you become jaded at all? I mean, it has to affect your heart.
I am the son of a Holocaust survivor myself.
Could I ask you that?
I think that as an educator, our mission here to educate the next generation is what gives us the strength to think ahead, what to do with that story for generations to come.
Scott Ross for CBN at Yad Vashem in
Generations of one Jewish family serve in the military to preserve the destiny of the Jewish people. As we mentioned, Israel is honoring the memory of the 6 million Jews who were murdered in the Holocaust. But there were other Jews who fought in the U.S. military, enabling a victory for the world, their country, and ultimately the Jewish people. More than 75 years later, one soldier in the Israel Defense Forces told CBN News how his family's 300-year history of military service on 3 continents closed the gap, taking them through World War II and finally home to Israel. Here's Julie Stahl with that story.
At age 18, Jesse Ebner immigrated to Israel to enter the IDF and fulfill a family tradition that goes back generations.
I knew I was going to the military based off of my family's history that everybody for the past 300 years has been in one military or another, starting back in the Austrian Empire all the way to the United States. And I decided that I had to come here for ideological reasons.
Ebner's grandfather and great-uncles fought with the American military during World War II. Those great-uncles helped defeat Nazi Germany and liberate the Dachau concentration camp.
One brother was in the 101st Airborne. They liberated the Dachau internment camp. And his other brother was in the 1st Infantry Division, and he landed also at the D-Day landings.
Meanwhile, grandfather Jacob served in the Pacific, fighting the Japanese.
My grandfather, he was a Seabee. A Seabee is a combat engineer in the Navy, and during World War II, their job was to open the way for the Marines to land on the beaches to fight the Japanese. So he was in Iwo Jima, he was in Guadalcanal. His job was to get onto the beach, defuse mines, to stop tank traps, in order for the Marines to be able to have a successful invasion of these islands.
This military heritage that began centuries ago also led to a name change.
We originally were the Cohen family, and they decided that they wanted to be officers in the Austrian military, so they bought the last name Ebner, which was a nice Austrian last name. And it just continued up until my father himself he was a fighter pilot in the United States Air Force.
Ebner now feels his family has come full circle.
I think partially was hearing about the experiences of my grandfather and his brothers to find something that I could fight for, and I saw Israel, it's our homeland, and it's something that we can fight for now, and it's something that exists. And it might have been something that 300 years ago my family would have liked to have done, but did not have the opportunity to do it. Something that I feel could close the circle also of my grandfather's brother who liberated the camp. the people that were in the camps now, that we can stand up for ourselves.
With anti-Semitism on the rise around the world, Ebner says it's important for Israel to be here for the Jewish people and for the IDF to be able to protect it.
I'm happy to wake up every day to know that I'm doing my part to make sure that the world's a little bit safer. We're on the front lines of what could happen to the world, and that's why we need to be the strongest we can be and keep up what we're doing, because I believe the IDF is the strongest army in the world and that we're ready for whatever our neighborhood can throw at us.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Rehovot, Israel.
Well, that's one example of how the Jewish people have survived through the ages, and why many proclaim, Am Israel High, the people of Israel live. Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube.